I was sitting by my son's hospital bed, watching him sleep in a full body cast, when the head nurse brushed past me. She didn't make eye contact. She didn't say a word. She simply pressed a crumpled piece of paper into my palm and kept walking. Her hands were shaking. I waited until she turned the corner before I opened my hand. The note had just 6 words scrawled in hurried blue ink. "Don't come back. He is lying. Check the camera." What I found on that footage didn't just break my heart. It destroyed my entire life. Before I tell you what I saw in the dark, let me tell you how I ended up in that hospital room thinking I was the worst father in the world. My name is Harrison Bennett. I am 70 years old. I spent 45 years of my life as a structural engineer here in Chicago. I built foundations that hold up skyscrapers against the wind off Lake Michigan. I know how things stand, and I know how things break. But nothing in my career prepared me for the phone call I got at 2 in the morning. It was my daughter-in-law, Monica. She was screaming so loud I could hardly understand her. She told me Lucas was dying. She told me he had fallen. She told me it was all my fault. I drove to Chicago Med doing 80 miles an hour on the expressway. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. When I burst into the emergency room, the smell hit me first. That sharp mix of antiseptic and old blood. It is a smell that stays in your nose for days. I found cubicle 4 and froze in the doorway. My son Lucas was lying there. He is 38 years old, a grown man, but in that moment he looked like a broken child. His right leg was elevated and wrapped in thick plaster. His face was a map of purple bruises. His lip was split. I rushed to his side. "Lucas," I said, "I am here." What happened? He opened his eyes and they were swimming with tears. He reached out and grabbed my jacket with his good hand. "Dad," he sobbed. It was the stairs. The basement stairs at your house. I told you they were loose. I told you to fix them. I stepped on the 3rd tread, and it just snapped. I fell all the way down to the concrete. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I stood there holding his hand, but my mind was racing. You see, I am not just a retired old man who putters around the garden. I am an engineer. Details are my life. I looked at Lucas sobbing in pain, and then I looked inward at my own memory. That staircase he was talking about was solid oak. 2 months ago, I spent 2 weeks reinforcing it myself. I installed steel brackets under every single tread. I tested the load-bearing capacity myself. I weighed 200 pounds, and I had jumped on that step to make sure it was secure. There was no physical way that wood could have snapped. It was structurally impossible. But looking at my son, broken and weeping logic abandoned me. Guilt is a powerful weapon, and my family knows exactly how to aim it. I started to apologize. I started to say I was sorry. But before I could get the words out, Monica stepped out from the shadows of the room. My daughter-in-law is a beautiful woman, but in that harsh hospital light, she looked sharp, predatory. She didn't look like a wife who had just almost lost her husband. She looked like a lawyer closing a case. She didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She stepped between me and Lucas and pointed a manicured finger at my chest. "Are you happy now, Harrison?" she hissed. She never called me Dad. It was always Harrison. "Look at him. He could be paralyzed. He could be dead. We told you that house was falling apart. We told you to hire a contractor. But no, you are too cheap. You sit on that pile of retirement money like a dragon hoarding every cent while your only son breaks his bones on your rotting property." Her words cut deep. They were designed to hurt, and they were designed to distract. Because the truth is, I wasn't hoarding money. I had bought them their house in the suburbs 5 years ago. A $1.2 million home that I paid for in cash so they wouldn't have a mortgage. I paid for the cars. I paid for the vacations they took while I stayed home. I wasn't cheap, I was just careful. But in that moment, with the beeping of the heart monitor and Lucas groaning in pain, I couldn't defend myself. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I will pay for everything. I will fix it." Monica laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Fix it? You can't fix a shattered femur with an apology, Harrison. He is going to be out of work for months. He is a top real estate agent. Do you know how much commission he is going to lose? Who is going to pay our bills? Who is going to pay for the rehabilitation? You need to make this right. And not with pocket change. We are talking about serious compensation." She wasn't talking about healing. She was talking about money. Immediately. Lucas groaned again, louder this time. Monica leaned over him, smoothing his hair, her voice suddenly switching to a sickly sweet tone. "It is okay, baby. Daddy is here. He is going to take care of us. He has to. Or else we will have to talk to a lawyer about negligence." The threat hung in the air. My own son. Suing me. I looked at Lucas, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to tell his wife to stop. But he just closed his eyes and nodded. "Yeah, Dad," he whispered. "You have to make it right. I am in so much pain." I felt like the room was shrinking. I needed air. Monica saw my hesitation and seized the moment. "Go home, Harrison," she commanded. "Go get your homeowner's insurance policy and bring it here. We need to file a claim immediately. If you file it as a liability claim against yourself, the payout is faster. Go. Now. Lucas needs rest and you are upsetting him." I nodded, defeated. I turned to leave this room, feeling the weight of my 70 years pressing down on my shoulders. I walked out into the corridor, my mind a fog of guilt and confusion. How could the stairs break? Had I missed something? Was I really getting old and incompetent just like they said? I was walking toward the exit, staring at the floor, when I collided with a nurse. It wasn't a gentle bump. She slammed into me with purpose. I looked up, ready to apologize. It was the head nurse. Her name tag said Sarah. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes that looked strangely familiar, though I couldn't place her. She gripped my arm to steady me, but she didn't let go. Her fingers dug into my sleeve. I looked at her, confused. She looked left, then right, checking the hallway. Then, in a movement so fast I almost missed it, she slid a folded piece of paper into my hand and closed my fingers around it. I opened my mouth to ask her what was happening, but she squeezed my hand hard, silencing me. Her eyes were pleading. She leaned in close, pretending to check my pulse, and whispered, "Do not go back in there. Just read it." Then she pulled away, straightened her uniform, and walked briskly down the hall as if nothing had happened. I stood there for a moment, stunned. The hospital bustled around me. Doctors rushing gurneys, rolling announcements over the intercom. But I was in a bubble of silence. I walked out the automatic doors into the cool Chicago night air. I walked to my truck parked under a flickering street lamp in the parking garage. I sat in the driver's seat and turned on the dome light. My hands were trembling as I unfolded the paper. It was a page torn from a medical notepad. The handwriting was hurried, jagged. It read, "Don't come again. He is lying. Check the camera at 3 a.m. I stared at the note. He is lying. Check the camera. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Not the slow thud of grief I had felt earlier, but the fast, sharp rhythm of suspicion. I thought about the stairs again, the steel brackets, the oak treads, the impossibility of the accident. And then I remembered something. I didn't just buy Lucas and Monica that house. I installed the security system myself. I am an engineer. I like systems. I like safety. I had set up a localized server in their basement that controlled the smart home features. Lights, locks, and cameras. They knew about the exterior cameras, of course. But they didn't know the system had internal logs and motion sensors that recorded to a cloud backup I had access to. I had never checked it. I respected their privacy. But tonight, staring at that note privacy felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. I didn't drive home to my house. I drove to theirs. I still had the emergency key. I needed to see the server. I needed to know what happened at 3 a.m. As I drove through the dark streets of Chicago, the sadness in my chest began to harden into something colder, something like steel. If my son was lying about breaking his leg, then why was he in a cast? And if he didn't fall down my stairs, where did he fall? I pulled up to their house. It was dark. They were both at the hospital. I let myself in. The air inside was stale. It smelled of stale wine and something burnt. I walked past the living room heading for the basement office where the server was. But as I passed the kitchen table, I saw something that made me stop. It was a pile of envelopes. Red envelopes. Final notices. I picked one up. It was a foreclosure warning from the bank. But that didn't make sense. I had bought the house cash. There was no mortgage. Unless. My hands shook as I opened the letter. There was a mortgage. A second mortgage taken out 3 years ago. And it wasn't just a small loan, it was for $800,000. And it was in default. I dropped the letter. I looked at the next one. Gambling debts. A letter from a casino in Indiana. Another from a credit card company. The total was staggering. My son, the successful real estate agent, was broke. He was drowning. And suddenly Monica's demand for immediate insurance money didn't sound like concern for medical bills. It sounded like desperation. I ran down to the basement. I woke up the computer monitor. The blue light washed over my face. I typed in my administrator password. I accessed the camera logs. I scrolled back to the previous night. 3 a.m. I found the file. I clicked play. The video that appeared on the screen was high definition. It was the living room of this very house. Lucas was there. And he wasn't injured. He was pacing back and forth holding a bottle of whiskey. He looked terrified. Monica was there too. She was sitting on the sofa, calm, cold. In her hands, she held a heavy baseball bat wrapped in a thick white towel. I watched, unable to breathe, as Monica stood up. She said something to him. I turned up the volume. Her voice came through the speakers, tinny but clear. "Stop crying, Lucas. It is the only way. The old man has a liability policy of $500,000. If you fall at his house, the insurance pays out immediately. We pay off the bookie and we save the house. Now sit down." I watched my son, my own flesh and blood, sit down on the coffee table. He propped his leg up on the ottoman. He took a long swig of the whiskey. He looked at his wife and nodded. He was shaking. Monica didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She raised the bat high above her head. I wanted to look away. I wanted to close my eyes. But I forced myself to watch. I watched her swing that bat with all her strength. I heard the sickening crunch of bones snapping even through the computer speakers. I heard my son scream. And then I watched Monica toss the bat aside, pick up the phone and dial 911, her voice instantly changing from a monster to a panicked wife. I sat there in the dark basement, the video playing on a loop, the image of the bat coming down, the sound of the snap, the betrayal. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I felt the engineer in me taking over. I was looking at a structure that had failed, a foundation that was rotten. And when a building is rotten, you don't patch it, you condemn it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a USB drive. I started copying the files. They wanted an insurance payout. They wanted my help. Well, I was going to give them exactly what they deserved. But first, I had to find out just how deep the rot went. I sat in the hospital parking lot for 20 minutes before I opened the door of my truck. I adjusted the rearview mirror, but I wasn't checking my hair. I was checking my mask. I let my shoulders slump. I relaxed the muscles in my face until my jaw hung slightly loose. I rubbed my eyes until they were red and watery. I needed to look like a man defeated by guilt, a father broken by his own negligence. I needed to become exactly who they thought I was, an old useless fool. I walked into the hospital entrance, moving slower than usual, dragging my feet just enough to make a scuffing sound on the linoleum. The morning light filtering through the glass atrium felt harsh, exposing. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The anger I felt the night before hadn't disappeared. It had just changed state. It had frozen into a cold, hard block of ice in the center of my chest. When I pushed open the door to room 402, the scene was perfectly staged. Lucas was propped up in bed, looking pale and tragic. The breakfast tray in front of him remained untouched. Monica was sitting in the armchair by the window, scrolling on her phone. But the moment she saw me, she dropped it into her lap and sat up straight. Her eyes narrowed, scanning my face, looking for weakness. I gave it to her. I didn't say hello, I just walked to the foot of the bed and gripped the plastic railing, letting my hands tremble visibly. I looked at Lucas's cast, then at his face. I made my voice crack when I spoke. I didn't sleep at all last night, I said, keeping my eyes down. I just kept thinking about what you said, Monica. About how I hoard money. About how I let this happen. Monica stood up and walked over to me. She didn't offer comfort. She circled me like a shark smelling blood in the water. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor. Well, Harrison thinking doesn't pay the bills, she said, her voice tight. The doctor was just in here. He said Lucas might need a second surgery. A complex reconstruction. Do you have any idea what that costs? Do you have any idea what out-of-network anesthesia runs these days? I knew exactly what it cost. I also knew that Lucas had top-tier health insurance because I paid the premiums myself every month. But I didn't mention that. I just nodded, swallowing hard. I know, I whispered. I know. That is why I made a decision. I drove out to the lake house this morning. I called a realtor. I am going to list it. I am going to sell the cabin on Lake Michigan. It is mortgage-free. It should bring in at least $400,000. I will give it all to you. I waited for the relief. I waited for the gratitude. That cabin was my pride and joy. I built the deck with my own hands. It was where Patrice and I had spent our happiest summers. Putting it on the market should have been a monumental sacrifice in their eyes. But when I looked up, I didn't see relief. I saw annoyance. Monica exchanged a quick, dark glance with Lucas. She crossed her arms. Harrison, are you serious? She snapped. Do you know how long it takes to sell a vacation home in this market? Months. Maybe a year. Lucas needs surgery next week. The creditors aren't going to wait for a closing date. We need liquidity now, not promises of money down the road. Lucas let out a theatrical groan, clutching his leg. Dad, please, he whined. The stress is making the pain worse. Just listen to Monica. She has a better idea. She knows about finances. Monica reached into her oversized designer purse. I watched her hand disappear inside, and for a split second, I remembered the baseball bat. But she pulled out a blue folder. She opened it and pulled out a stack of documents, thick and stapled. She slapped them down on the bedside table. We don't have time for real estate games, Harrison, she said, smoothing the paper with her palm. We need to access your investment accounts, the liquid assets, your retirement fund. I felt a chill run down my spine. My retirement fund. $2 million. It wasn't just money. It was 45 years of waking up at 4 a.m. to drive to construction sites. It was 45 years of freezing winters on steel beams and sweating summers pouring concrete. It was the security I had built for Patrice and now for myself. They wanted the keys to the vault. Monica picked up a pen and held it out to me. This is a durable power of attorney," she said, her voice dropping to that reasonable, helpful tone she used when she wanted something. "It just gives Lucas the authority to manage your accounts while you deal with everything. You are getting older, Harrison. We all see it. You are forgetting things. You are letting the house rot. Let Lucas handle the finances. He is a broker. He knows the market. He can liquidate what we need for the medical bills and invest the rest so it grows. It is the only way to save us." I looked at the document. It wasn't just a limited power of attorney for medical bills. I could see the header from where I stood. It was a general durable power of attorney. It would give Lucas total control. He could empty my bank accounts, sell my stocks, even sell my own house out from under me, and I wouldn't be able to stop him. It was a license to steal everything I had left. I looked at Lucas. He was watching me with hungry eyes. The pain in his leg seemed forgotten. He wasn't looking at his father. He was looking at a walking ATM machine that was about to dispense the jackpot. I reached out and took the pen. My hand was shaking, not because I was pretending, but because the rage was trying to break through my skin. I held the pen over the signature line. I saw Monica lean in, her breath held her eyes wide and greedy. She was practically vibrating with anticipation. I brought the tip of the pen down to the paper. I watched the ink make a small dot. Then I let my hand spasm. I jerked my wrist violently, sending the pen clattering across the plastic table and onto the floor. It rolled under the bed. "Oh, damn it," I muttered, clutching my hand to my chest. "My arthritis. It is flaring up again. I can't grip anything today." I bent down, pretending to look for the pen, buying myself a few seconds to compose my face. When I straightened up, I looked confused, patting my jacket pockets. "And my glasses," I mumbled, looking around the room frantically. "I don't have my reading glasses. I can't sign a legal document without reading it, Monica. You know that. I need to know what I am signing." Monica's face twisted in frustration. She looked like she wanted to scream. She bent down, snatched the pen from under the bed, and shoved it back at me. "Just sign it, Harrison. It is standard boilerplate. We don't have time for this." I backed away, holding my hands up. "I can't," I said, my voice rising in feigned panic. "I need my glasses. They must be at home. I will go get them. I will drive home, get my glasses, and I will come back tonight. I promise. I will bring the deed to the lake house too, just in case." Lucas tried to sit up. "Dad, just sign the damn paper," he shouted, forgetting his role as the invalid. But I was already moving toward the door. "I will be back," I stammered, backing out into the hallway. "I just need my glasses. I am so sorry. I am so useless." I turned and walked away before they could stop me. I heard Monica slam the folder shut behind me. I heard her curse. I walked down the corridor, keeping up my shuffle until I turned the corner and was out of sight. Then I straightened my back. I walked briskly to the elevator, my mind clear and sharp. They didn't just want insurance money. They wanted everything. They wanted to strip me bare and leave me to die in a nursing home, while they spent my life's work on gambling debts and luxury cars. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, I checked my watch. It was 10 in the morning. I had about 8 hours before I had to return. 8 hours to turn the tables. I wasn't going home to get my glasses. I was going to see the only person in this city I could still trust. I was going to see my lawyer, Caldwell. And I wasn't going to ask him how to sell a house. I was going to ask him how to demolish one. I drove straight from the hospital to the downtown loop, guiding my truck through the dense mid-morning traffic. My destination was a building I had helped design 30 years ago, a limestone monolith that housed the law offices of Caldwell and Associates. James Caldwell wasn't just my attorney. He was my oldest friend. We had played poker every Friday night for 20 years until Patrice got sick. He was the only man alive who knew the exact dimensions of my finances, and the only man I trusted to help me fortify them against the siege I was currently under. When I walked into his office, the receptionist didn't ask for my name. She just pointed toward the corner office. Jim was waiting for me, standing by the window with a grim expression. He is a big man, a former linebacker, but age had softened him around the edges. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He knew why I was there. I had called him from the car and told him I needed to secure my assets immediately. "Sit down, Harrison," he said, his voice rumbling like a distant train. "You look like hell." I sat in the wingback chair, the leather creaking. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I told him about the hospital. I told him about the power of attorney Monica had tried to force me to sign. I told him about the house I bought them and the debts I had seen on Lucas's desk. I left out the video for a moment. I wanted to deal with the financial bleeding first. "Jim," I said, leaning forward, "I need to lock everything down. I want to put my house, the lake cabin, and the investment accounts into an irrevocable trust. I want to make sure that even if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, Lucas cannot touch a single cent without a trustee's approval. They are desperate, Jim. They are dangerous." Jim nodded slowly, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. He asked me a few questions about dates and amounts. Then he turned to his computer. "Let me just pull up the current deed status on your primary residence," he said, typing with 2 fingers. "We need to make sure the title is clear before we transfer it to the trust. It should be quick. I know you paid that mortgage off 20 years ago." I watched him. I saw the reflection of the screen in his glasses. I saw him squint. Then I saw him stop typing. He leaned closer to the screen. He clicked the mouse a few times harder than necessary. His jaw tightened. The silence in the room stretched out, heavy and suffocating. "Harrison," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "when did you take out a second mortgage?" I frowned. "What are you talking about? I haven't owed a dime on that house since 1998. You know that." I framed the letter from the bank. Jim turned the monitor around so I could see it. He pointed to a line on the digital document. It was a lien, a secured loan against the property address of my home, the house where I lived, the house where Patrice died. Recorded 3 years ago, Jim read, his voice flat with disbelief. "Lender is a private equity firm based in Delaware. The principal amount is $800,000. Harrison, look at the status." I looked. The text was red. Default. Pre-foreclosure proceedings initiated. My vision started to tunnel. I couldn't breathe. $800,000. My house, my sanctuary. The place where I had raised my sons. The place where I had built a sunroom for Patrice so she could watch the Cardinals in the winter. It wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to a bank in Delaware. But I didn't sign that. I whispered, the room spinning. I never signed that. Jim clicked on a PDF attachment. It opened a scanned document. It was the loan agreement. And there at the bottom of the last page was my signature, Harrison J. Bennett. The loops on the H were perfect. The slant of the B was precise. It was my signature. But I had never held that pen. Lucas, I said the name, tasting like ash in my mouth. Jim looked at me with pity that quickly turned to professional rage. "He forged it," Jim said. "He must have traced it from an old check or a birthday card. And he must have had a notary in his pocket to stamp it. Harrison, this loan is 3 years old. He has been intercepting the mail. That is why you never saw the statements. That is why you never saw the default notices. He has been stealing your mail." I sat back in the chair, feeling the blood drain from my face. It all made sense now. The times Lucas would drop by unexpectedly, offering to get the mail for me because of my bad knees. The times he insisted on house-sitting when Patrice and I went to the lake. He hadn't been being a good son. He had been covering his tracks. He had stolen my home out from under me while I was sleeping in it. I closed my eyes. I thought about the foundation of that house. I had poured the concrete myself in 1980. I had checked the rebar. I had made sure it would last 100 years. And now my son had taken a sledgehammer to the pillars. He had leveraged the roof over my head to fund his gambling addiction. He had bet my life and he had lost, Harrison Jim said gently. We can fight this. We can prove fraud. We can hire a handwriting expert. But if we do that, if we file a police report for forgery and grand larceny, Lucas is going to prison. There is no middle ground here. This is a felony, a massive one. I opened my eyes. The image of the baseball bat flashed in my mind. The sound of the snap. The look on Monica's face. They were willing to break bones to get $500,000. What would they do if they knew I had found out about an $800,000 theft? They weren't just thieves. They were termites. They had eaten through the wood, through the support beams, leaving nothing but a shell of a family that was waiting to collapse on top of me. If I didn't act now, if I didn't cut them out completely, I would be buried in the rubble. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. I saw people walking, living their lives, trusting their families. I felt a profound sense of isolation. I was an engineer who had just discovered that the bridge he built was made of paper. Do it, I said to the glass. Jim hesitated. Do what, Harrison? The trust. No, I turned around. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was cold, hard calculation. Structural integrity had been compromised. Demolition was the only option. Draw up the papers, Jim. Not for a trust. I want you to prepare a full criminal complaint. I want the handwriting expert. I want the affidavits. And I want you to contact the bank holding the note. Tell them the signature is fraudulent. Tell them I am pressing charges. But Harrison Jim said, standing up, that is your son. Once we start this train, we can't stop it. He will go to jail for a long time. I looked at my old friend. I thought about Patrice. I thought about how she would feel knowing her son had sold our memories for poker chips. And then I thought about the poison in the soup that Monica was planning. I don't have a son, I said, my voice steady and flat. I have a tenant who has violated his lease, and I have a criminal who has broken into my life. I want him gone, Jim. I don't want to just kick them out. I want to bury them under the weight of their own lies. And there is something else, I added, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the USB drive with the camera footage. I need you to look at this. Because the mortgage fraud is just the tip of the iceberg. You are going to need a bigger file, Jim. We are going to need the district attorney for this one. Jim took the drive, looking at me with a mixture of fear and respect. He nodded slowly. Okay, Harrison. Let's get to work. I sat back down. We spent the next 3 hours mapping out the destruction of Lucas Bennett. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt efficient. I was fixing a problem. It was a structural repair. And like any major renovation, it was going to be messy, it was going to be loud, and when the dust settled, the landscape would be changed forever. But at least the foundation would be clean. I sat in the back booth of a 24-hour diner 2 blocks from the hospital, nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a sound that usually annoyed me, but tonight, it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. I checked my watch. It was 7:15 in the evening. The shift change at the hospital had just happened. I was waiting for Sarah. When she walked in, she didn't look like the confident head nurse who ran the floor with an iron fist. She looked like a woman looking over her shoulder. She wore a heavy coat over her scrubs and a wool hat pulled low. She scanned the room, spotted me, and walked quickly to my booth. She slid into the seat opposite me, keeping her hands wrapped around her purse. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I pushed a fresh cup of coffee toward her. She took it with a nod, her eyes darting to the window as if she expected the police, or worse, my daughter-in-law, to burst through the glass. Why, I asked simply. Why did you help me? You could have lost your job. You could have lost your license for interfering. Why take the risk for an old man you don't even know? Sarah took a sip of the coffee and then looked me dead in the eye. A small, sad smile touched her lips. But I do know you, Mr. Bennett. You just don't know me. You knew my father, Michael Jenkins. He was a foreman on the Millennium Spire project 20 years ago. The name hit me like a physical blow. Mike Jenkins. I remembered him. He was a good man, a hard worker with a laugh that could fill a construction site. I remembered the day the scaffolding collapsed. I remembered the sound of the steel giving way and the silence that followed. Mike had survived, but his back was shattered. The construction company, the one I was contracting for, tried to bury him. They claimed it was operator error. They denied his workers compensation. They tried to starve him out so he would settle for pennies. I remember I said, my voice soft. He was a good man. I am sorry for what happened to him. Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. We were going to lose our house. My mom was working 3 jobs and Dad needed surgery that the insurance wouldn't cover because the company was fighting the claim. We were packing boxes. We were ready to move into a shelter. And then an envelope showed up in our mailbox. There was no return address, just a cashier's check for $45,000. I looked down at my hands, the calluses worn smooth by age. I remembered that check. I remembered walking into the dealership and selling my 1967 Mustang, the car I had restored piece by piece since I was 25. It was my pride and joy. But when I looked at Mike Jenkins in that wheelchair, a car seemed like a stupid thing to hold on to. It was enough for the surgery, Sarah whispered. It saved his life. It saved our home. My dad suspected it was you. He said you were the only engineer who ever came to visit him in the hospital, the only one who looked him in the eye. He told me that Harrison Bennett was the kind of man who built things to last, including people. When I saw your name on the chart for room 402 and I saw that woman screaming at you, I knew I had to do something. I am paying a debt, Mr. Bennett, just like you did. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You don't owe me anything, Sarah. But thank you. You saved me from a terrible mistake. Sarah pulled her hand back and reached into her oversized purse. Her expression shifted from nostalgic to terrified. She looked around the diner again, ensuring no one was close enough to hear. I didn't just come here to talk about the past, Harrison, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I have to show you something else. Something worse. She pulled out a small digital voice recorder. It was the kind doctors use for dictating notes. She placed it on the table between us and covered it with her hand. The intercom system in room 402 is old, she explained rapidly. Sometimes the button sticks on the patient's side. It leaves an open line to the nurse's station. Usually we just hear the TV or snoring. But this afternoon, about 2 hours after you left, the light on the console flickered on. Monica thought the room was private. She thought no one was listening. I happened to be at the desk. I hit record. I looked at the small black device. I felt a cold dread pooling in my stomach. I thought I had seen the bottom of the barrel with the video of the broken leg. I thought I knew how low they could go, but the look in Sarah's eyes told me I was wrong. The barrel had no bottom. I picked up the recorder. I put it to my ear. Sarah pressed the play button. The audio was fuzzy at first, static, and the background hum of the hospital ventilation. Then Monica's voice cut through, sharp and impatient. Stop whining about the pain meds, Lucas. You need to be lucid when he comes back. We need that signature. Then I heard my son's voice, slurred and weak. He is not going to sign it, Mon. He knows something. Did you see the way he looked at me? He looked at me like I was a stranger. Monica laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. He is just confused. He is old. That is why this is going to be so easy. Once we get the power of attorney, we transfer the liquid assets first. Then we sell the stocks. We can have the accounts drained in 3 days. That was bad, but it was nothing I didn't already know. I waited. But what about him? Lucas asked. He isn't just going to let us take it. He will go to the police. He will fight us. There was a pause on the tape, a silence that felt heavy and charged. Then Monica spoke again, her voice lower, more deliberate. He won't fight anyone, Lucas. You told me yourself. He has a heart condition. He takes beta blockers. He takes blood thinners. He is a walking time bomb. What are you saying? Lucas whispered. I am saying that old men die in their sleep all the time, Monica said. Her voice was so casual, she could have been ordering lunch. Especially when they are under stress. Especially when they accidentally take too much medication. Or maybe the wrong medication. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hand gripped the recorder so hard the plastic creaked. Insulin, Monica said. It is clean. It metabolizes quickly. If an old man with a weak heart has a sudden hypoglycemic event in his sleep, the coroner calls it natural causes. No autopsy. Just a grieving son and a funeral. And then we are the sole beneficiaries of the life insurance policy. $2 million plus the house plus the accounts. We will be kings, Lucas. We just need to get through this week. The recording ended with a click. I sat there frozen. The diner noise faded away. The clatter of plates, the sizzle of the grill, the chatter of the other patrons, it all disappeared. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, the heart they planned to stop. This wasn't fraud anymore. This wasn't theft. This was conspiracy to commit capital murder. They were planning to kill me. My daughter-in-law was planning to inject me with insulin and watch me die, and my son, my own son, hadn't screamed in horror. He hadn't called for help. He had just listened. I looked up at Sarah. Her face was pale. She was trembling. I didn't know what to do, she whispered. I couldn't go to the police yet. It is just a recording. They might say they were joking. They might say I've fabricated it. But I knew you needed to know. You can't let them near you, Harrison. You can't eat anything they give you. You can't be alone with them. I handed the recorder back to her. My hand was surprisingly steady. The fear had evaporated, replaced by a clarity that was sharp as a diamond. They wanted to kill me. They wanted to erase me from the earth so they could consume what I had built. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. Before this moment, I wanted justice. I wanted my money back. I wanted to teach them a lesson. Now I realized that I was in a war. And in a war, you don't just defend yourself. You neutralize the threat. Keep that recording safe, Sarah, I said, my voice low and hard. Do not delete it. Do not show it to anyone else yet. What are you going to do? She asked, her eyes wide with fear. I stood up. I buttoned my coat. I felt the weight of 70 years, but it wasn't a burden anymore. It was armor. I am going to give them what they want, I said. They want the power of attorney. They want access to my life. I am going to invite them in. But they don't know that I am not the prey anymore. I am the trap. I took out my wallet and placed a $100 bill on the table for the coffee. Go home, Sarah. Be safe. I will contact you when it is over. I walked out of the diner into the night. The air was cold, biting. I took a deep breath. I had work to do. I had to call the chief of police. I had to call Jim Caldwell. And I had to prepare a dinner. Monica wanted to serve me soup. Well, I was going to serve her a meal she would never forget. The structural integrity of their plot was about to be tested, and I was going to be the one swinging the wrecking ball. I walked into my house and locked the deadbolt behind me. I didn't just turn the latch. I engaged the heavy steel security bolt I had installed myself 10 years ago. It slid into place with a solid thud, that echoed in the empty hallway. For the first time in 40 years, this house didn't feel like a home. It felt like a bunker. I wasn't a father coming home from work anymore. I was a soldier preparing a kill zone. I went straight to the kitchen table and laid out the arsenal I had gathered. The USB drive with the video of the self-inflicted fracture, the foreclosure notice from the bank with the forged signature, and the small digital recorder Sarah had given me holding the audio of my own murder being planned. It was a terrifying tableau of betrayal laid out on the same oak table where we used to color Easter eggs. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years, but knew by heart. It was the private cell of Robert Miller, the chief of police. Bob and I went back to high school. We played football together. I built the deck on his house. He answered on the second ring. "Harrison," he said, his voice warm but surprised. "It's late. Is everything okay?" "No, Bob," I said, my voice steady. "Nothing is okay. I need you to come over, and I need you to come alone. I have something to show you that you aren't going to believe." Bob was at my door in 20 minutes. He was in plain clothes, but I saw the service weapon on his hip. He sat at my kitchen table and I played him the tape. I watched his face go from confusion to horror and finally to a cold, professional rage. He listened to Monica discussing insulin and heart conditions. He watched the video of the baseball bat. He looked at the forged loan documents. When the tape ended, the silence in the kitchen was heavy enough to crush a man. Bob stood up, his hand drifting to his belt. "Harrison, this is enough," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This is conspiracy to commit murder insurance fraud, forgery, grand larceny. I can have a squad car at the hospital in 10 minutes. We will pick them both up tonight. Lucas is in a cast, he isn't going anywhere. And Monica, we will have her in cuffs before she finishes her dinner." I shook my head. "No, Bob, not yet." Bob looked at me like I was crazy. "Harrison, are you listening to me? They are planning to kill you. They are talking about insulin. If they get desperate, they won't wait. We need to stop this now. If you arrest them now," I said, leaning forward. "Monica gets a lawyer. She claims it was just talk. She claims she was blowing off steam. She claims the video was a reenactment or some twisted roleplay. A good defense attorney might get the charges reduced. Maybe she does a few years for fraud. Maybe Lucas gets probation because he is the victim of the broken leg." I stood up and walked to the sink, looking out into the dark yard. "I don't want them to have a defense, Bob. I don't want a plea bargain. I want them buried. They didn't just steal my money. They stole my son. They killed the memory of his mother. I want to catch them in the act. I want to catch her with the poison in her hand." Bob hesitated. He paced the kitchen floor. "It is too dangerous, Harrison. We can't let you be the bait. If she actually tries to dose you, she won't succeed," I cut in, "because you will be here. You and your men. I want you in the pantry. I want you monitoring the cameras. I am going to invite her over. I am going to give her exactly what she wants. The opportunity." Bob stared at me for a long moment. He saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a grieving widower. It was the look of an engineer who had calculated the load-bearing capacity of a bridge and knew exactly when to detonate the charges. "Okay," he sighed, rubbing his face. "We will do it your way. But I am putting a wire on you, and I am having a tactical team in the garage. If she so much as reaches for her purse wrong, we are taking the door down." I nodded. "Good. Now I have a phone call to make." I picked up my cell and dialed Monica. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I felt completely numb. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with anticipation. "Harrison," she said. "Where are you? You said you would be back by 6. I pitched my voice to sound tired, frail. "I am sorry, Monica," I rasped. "I drove all the way home and I just hit a wall. I am exhausted. My heart is fluttering a bit. I don't think I can make the drive back to the hospital tonight." There was a pause. I could hear the calculation in her silence. Then suspicion. But the papers, Harrison. We need those papers signed. Did you find your glasses? Yes, I said. I found them. And I signed the document. It is all done. It is sitting right here on the kitchen table. I heard her intake of breath. The greed was palpable, crackling over the phone line. That is great news, Harrison, she said, her voice smoothing out into fake concern. That is really great. But we need that document tonight. The surgeons need to schedule the procedure for the morning. Well, I said, forcing a cough. Why don't you come here? You can pick it up. And, honestly, Monica, I could use the company. I made a big pot of that chicken soup Lucas likes. The one with the rosemary. Come have dinner with me. We can talk about the house sale. I want to make sure you two are taken care of. I was handing her the weapon. I was giving her the stage. Chicken soup, liquid. Easy to mix something into. She didn't hesitate. I will be there in an hour, she said. I just need to make sure Lucas is settled for the night. You rest, Harrison. Don't exert yourself. We will take care of everything. I hung up the phone. I looked at Bob. She is coming. Bob nodded grimly and stepped out to call his team. I was alone in the kitchen. I walked over to the mantel above the fireplace. There was a framed photo of Patrice there taken on our 40th anniversary. She was smiling that radiant, honest smile that used to light up my world. I picked up the frame. My thumb traced the glass over her face. I felt a single tear roll down my cheek, hot and stinging. I am sorry, my love, I whispered to the photo. I promised to take care of him. I promised to protect our boy. But the boy we raised is gone. What is left? It is just a shell. A vessel for something ugly. I thought about Lucas. I thought about the little boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee, who used to bring me drawings of skyscrapers he wanted to build. And then I thought about the man who sat on a sofa and let his wife break his leg for a payout. I thought about the man who listened to a plan to stop his father's heart and didn't say a word. This isn't our son anymore, Patrice, I said, my voice hardening. This is a monster, and I have to stop him. I kissed the glass and set the photo down. I turned back to the kitchen. I had to get the soup ready. I had to set the table. I had to make sure everything was perfect for my daughter-in-law. 40 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. She was still monitoring the room audio at the hospital. It was a transcript of what Monica had said to Lucas right after hanging up with me. The message read, she just told him. She said, the old fool is serving it up on a silver platter. He is making soup. It is perfect. Tonight is the night, baby. Get the champagne ready. By tomorrow morning, we will be rich. I stared at the screen. Get the champagne ready. They were celebrating my death before it even happened. I put the phone in my pocket. I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I checked the monitor on the counter. It was Monica. She was checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. She looked excited. She looked like someone going to a party. I walked to the front door. I unlocked the deadbolt, but only the deadbolt. The trap was set. The bait was laid. I opened the door and put on the mask of the loving, tired father one last time. Welcome home, Monica, I whispered. The rain was hammering against the aluminum siding of my house, a relentless drumming rhythm that sounded like 1,000 fingers tapping for entry. I stood by the kitchen island, watching the steam rise from the large ceramic tureen of chicken soup. It was a recipe Patrice had perfected over 30 years, rich with rosemary, and thyme, a comfort food meant to heal. Tonight, however, it was just a prop. A stage dressing for the final act of a tragedy I never wanted to write. I checked the hidden camera I had installed in the crown molding above the cabinets. A tiny red light blinked once, invisible to the naked eye, unless you knew exactly where to look. I adjusted the collar of my flannel shirt, feeling the cold plastic of the wire taped to my chest. It was uncomfortable, itching against my skin, a constant reminder that the man standing in this kitchen wasn't Harrison Bennett, the father, but Harrison Bennett, the informant. Headlights swept across the front window, cutting through the darkness and the downpour. Tires crunched on the wet gravel of the driveway. I didn't move toward the door. I stayed right where I was, my hand resting on the ladle. I heard the car door slam, followed by the rapid click of heels on the pavement. The front door handle turned. I had left it unlocked, just the deadbolt thrown back in invitations to the executioner. Monica burst into the hallway, bringing the storm in with her. A gust of wind rattled the family photos on the wall before she slammed the door shut. She stood there for a moment, dripping wet. She was wearing a beige trench coat that probably cost more than my first car, but now it was dark with rain clinging to her frame. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was plastered to her forehead. Her mascara was slightly smudged. She didn't look like the poised socialite she pretended to be. She looked desperate. She looked dangerous. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was feeling, even though I had told her on the phone that my heart was fluttering. She didn't even take off her coat. She marched into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the room, ignoring the warmth, ignoring the food. She looked at me with a mixture of contempt and impatience that made my stomach turn. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Where is the paper?" I moved slowly, deliberately, keeping my movements heavy and tired. I gestured to the dining table, which I had set for two. There were placemats, silverware, and 2 empty bowls. In the center of the table, sitting innocuously next to the salt and pepper shakers, was a manila folder. "It is right there, Monica," I said, my voice rasping slightly. "Just like I promised. But please sit down. You are soaking wet. Let me get you a towel. Let's have some soup. It is a nasty night out there." She looked at the folder, her eyes hungry. She took a step toward it, her hand reaching out, but then she stopped. She looked at me. I was holding the ladle, smiling weakly. I looked harmless. I looked like a lonely old man desperate for company. She must have calculated that humor me for 20 minutes was a small price to pay for $2 million. "Fine," she snapped, shrugging off her wet coat and throwing it over one of the kitchen chairs. It landed with a heavy, wet thud. "But make it quick, Harrison. I have to get back to Lucas. He is in agony waiting for this to be resolved." She sat down at the table, but she didn't pull her chair in. She sat on the edge of the seat, poised to bolt. She placed her oversized leather handbag on the table right next to her bowl. I watched that bag. I knew what was inside. I knew the weapon she had brought to a dinner party. I walked over with the tureen and filled her bowl. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the room, clashing with the smell of her expensive, damp perfume. Then I filled my own bowl. I sat down opposite her. I didn't start eating. I picked up my mug of tea, wrapping my hands around it for warmth I didn't feel. Monica picked up her spoon, stirred the soup once, and dropped it back into the bowl with a clatter. She wasn't eating either. Her eyes were fixed on me, tracking my movements. "Aren't you going to eat, Harrison?" she asked. Her voice dropping to a faux sweetness that was more terrifying than her shouting. "You said you made it special. You need your strength, especially with your heart condition." I took a sip of tea. My hands were steady. "I am not very hungry," I lied. "My stomach has been in knots all day. I think I just need some napkins. I forgot to put them out." I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. I turned my back to her and walked toward the counter where the paper towel holder stood. This was the moment. I had engineered it perfectly. Above the stove, there was a decorative mirror angled slightly downward. It was something Patrice had bought years ago to make the kitchen look bigger. Now it was my rearview mirror. In the reflection, I saw Monica move. Her hand didn't go for the spoon. It darted into her open handbag. She pulled out a small glass vial. It was clear liquid. Insulin. She looked at my back, her eyes wide and manic. She uncapped the vial with her thumb. She reached across the table, her hand hovering over my bowl of soup. I waited. I needed the camera to see it. I needed the wire to catch the sound of her movement. I counted to 2 in my head. 1, 2. Then I spun around. I didn't turn slowly. I whipped around with a speed that a frail 70-year-old man shouldn't possess. I forgot the spoons, I said loudly. Monica gasped. It was a sharp intake of breath. Her hand jerked back as if she had touched a hot stove. She clenched her fist around the vial, hiding it in her palm, and shoved her hand under the table. The movement was clumsy, frantic. She knocked her spoon onto the floor. It clattered loudly against the hardwood. "Oh," she stammered, her face draining of color. I dropped my spoon. "You startled me, Harrison." I stared at her. I didn't look at the floor. I looked right into her eyes. I let the silence stretch out heavy and suffocating. I wanted her to know that I saw. I wanted her to feel the gaze of the engineer inspecting a crack in the foundation. "You seem jumpy, Monica," I said, walking back to the table but not sitting down. "You seem very nervous for someone who is just here to pick up a piece of paper." "I am not nervous," she hissed, retrieving the spoon and placing it on the table with a trembling hand. "I am stressed. My husband is in the hospital. We are about to lose everything, and you are playing host instead of helping us." I walked around the table. I stood behind my chair, gripping the back of it. I looked down at the soup she had tried to poison. It looked delicious. It looked innocent. Just like the house I had bought them. Just like the life I thought they had. "You know, Monica," I said, my voice low and reflective, "I have been thinking a lot about that staircase. The one Lucas fell down." She rolled her eyes, reaching for the folder again. "Oh my God, Harrison. Not this again. The wood was rotten. You admitted it." "No," I corrected her. "I didn't admit it. I accepted it because I trusted you. But I have been thinking. Oak doesn't just snap. Not like that. Not unless something is eating it from the inside." I leaned forward, resting my knuckles on the table. "Termites," I said. "That is what I was thinking. Nasty little creatures. They get into the structure. They burrow deep where you can't see them. They eat the heart out of the wood. They live in your walls, they feed on your shelter, and they smile at you while the roof is waiting to collapse on your head." Monica stared at me. Her expression shifted from annoyance to something else. Suspicion. Fear. She pulled her hand back from the folder. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "I am talking about rot, Monica. I am talking about things that look solid on the outside, but are hollow on the inside. I am talking about people who take and take and take, and when there is nothing left to take, they decide to burn the house down for the insurance money. Or maybe they decide to poison the owner." The color rushed back into her face, but it wasn't the color of life. It was the red flush of anger. She stood up, knocking her chair back. She grabbed her purse, clutching it to her chest, as if shielding the evidence inside. "You are senile," she spat. "You are talking nonsense. I don't have time for your metaphors and your ramblings. I have been patient, Harrison. I have been nice, but I am done." She pointed a shaking finger at the folder. "Give me the damn paper. Sign the insurance check. Do it now, or so help me God, I will have you declared incompetent by Monday morning. I will put you in a home so fast your head will spin. I will leave you there to rot, just like you say. Now give it to me." Oh, I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had married my son. I looked at the woman who had just tried to kill me in my own kitchen. I didn't feel fear anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, hard resolution. The trap was sprung. The evidence was recorded. The play was over. I reached into the inside pocket of my flannel shirt. Monica flinched, perhaps expecting a weapon, perhaps expecting the checkbook. I pulled out a thick white envelope. It wasn't the folder on the table. It was something I had carried next to my heart all evening. "You want the paper," I said quietly. "Here it is. This is exactly what you have been waiting for. This is what you deserve." I tossed the envelope onto the table. It landed with a solid slap right next to her bowl of soup. It slid across the polished wood and stopped inches from her hand. "Open it," I said. Monica looked at the envelope, then at me. Greed warred with suspicion in her eyes. Greed won. She dropped her purse onto the chair and snatched up the envelope. Her fingernails tore at the flap. She ripped it open, expecting a power of attorney, expecting a check, expecting the keys to the kingdom. She pulled out the stack of papers. She unfolded the first one. I watched her eyes scan the header. I watched the moment her brain registered the words. It wasn't a transfer of assets. It was a legal notice. "Eviction notice," she read, her voice trembling. "What is this?" "Keep reading," I said. She flipped the page. "Civil complaint for insurance fraud," she whispered. She flipped the page again, and then she stopped. She froze. The paper in her hand wasn't a legal document. It was a high-resolution photograph printed on glossy paper. It was a still frame from a video. A time-stamped image of a living room at 3 a.m. An image of a woman in a silk robe holding a towel-wrapped baseball bat high above her head, ready to strike the leg of the man cowering on the sofa. Monica made a sound that wasn't quite human. It was a strangled gasp of pure terror. She dropped the papers as if they were covered in acid. They scattered across the table, the photo landing face up, accusing her, damning her. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, wild, feral. The mask was completely gone. There was no daughter-in-law left. There was only a cornered animal. "You," she breathed. "You knew. You watched." I stood tall. I didn't look like a frail old man anymore. I looked like the man who built skyscrapers. I saw everything, Monica. I saw the bat. I heard the snap. And tonight I saw the vial in your hand. I heard you talking to Lucas about my heart. I heard you planning my funeral. She stared at me, her chest heaving. She looked at the door. It was blocked by my body. She looked at the kitchen knives in the wooden block on the counter. It was 5 feet away. "You old bastard," she screamed, her voice cracking into a shriek of rage. "You think you are smart. You think you can stop us. You are nothing. You are a dead man walking." She lunged. She didn't go for the door. She went for the knife block. Her hand wrapped around the handle of the chef's knife, the one I used to carve the turkey at Thanksgiving. She pulled it out, the steel gleaming in the kitchen light. "I will kill you," she screamed, raising the knife. "I will finish what I started." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her and said one word loud and clear for the microphone taped to my chest. "Now." The single syllable of my command hung in the air for a fraction of a second, suspended in the silence of the kitchen like a held breath. Monica's eyes flickered from my face to the hallway, confusion warring with her murderous intent. She didn't understand who I was talking to. She didn't understand that the word wasn't a plea for mercy, but a firing order. The knife was already in downward motion, the tip gleaming under the pendant lights, aimed directly at my chest, when the pantry door behind her exploded outward with a violence that shook the floorboards. It wasn't a gentle entry. It was a tactical breach. The wood splintered and flew across the room as 3 uniformed officers poured into the kitchen, their weapons drawn, their voices overlapping in a wall of commanded sound. "Police! Drop the knife! Get on the ground!" The noise was deafening, a sudden chaotic storm inside my quiet home. Monica screamed, but it wasn't a scream of anger anymore. It was a shriek of pure, unadulterated shock. The sudden intrusion shattered her focus. Her arm jerked and the knife sliced through the air inches from my flannel shirt, burying itself with a dull thud into the heavy oak of the dining table, quivering like a tuning fork. Before she could pull it free, before she could even process the shift in reality, the lead officer, a man half her age and twice her size, slammed into her. The impact was visceral. It drove the air from her lungs in a harsh grunt. She was driven into the side of the table, the china rattling, the bowl of soup she had tried to poison, splashing onto the floor. Then she was on the ground, face pressed against the hardwood, her arm twisted behind her back with a mechanical efficiency that offered no room for resistance. I stood completely still. I didn't step back. I didn't flinch. I watched the process with the detached eye of an engineer observing a controlled demolition. The click of the handcuffs ratcheting tight around her wrists was the final structural failure of her life. It was a cold, metallic sound that signaled the end of Monica Bennett, the socialite, and the beginning of inmate number whatever the county assigned to her. "Get off me," she shrieked, her face mashed against the floor, her expensive coat bunched up around her shoulders. "You are hurting me. He attacked me. He is crazy. He has a knife." Chief Miller walked in from the garage entrance, holstering his weapon. He looked down at her, his expression filled with a profound disappointment. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. He stepped over the puddle of soup and the scattered papers. "We have it all on tape," Monica Bob said, his voice calm and heavy. "We have the audio. We have the video. We saw the vial. We saw the knife. Save your breath for your lawyer. You are going to need it." One of the officers hauled her to her feet. She looked wild. Her hair was a rat's nest, her makeup smeared across her cheek, where it had been pressed into the floor. She looked at me, her eyes burning with a hatred so intense it felt like heat on my skin. She tried to lunge at me again, straining against the cuffs, spitting words like venom. "You planned this. You old bastard. You set me up." I reached down to the table. The knife was still stuck in the wood, a testament to her intent. Next to it, scattered among the spilled salt and pepper, were the papers she had dropped in her terror, the envelope she had torn open. I picked them up. I smoothed out the wrinkles with a slow, deliberate hand. "I didn't set you up, Monica," I said, my voice steady. "I just turned on the lights. You did the rest. You and your greed." I held up the papers she hadn't finished reading. She had seen the eviction notice. She had seen the fraud complaint. But she had missed the bottom of the stack. I separated the sheets and held them up so she could see them clearly in the harsh kitchen light. "You didn't finish your reading assignment," I said. "You saw the eviction. You saw the photo of the bat. But you missed the best part." I pointed to the third document. It was a dense legal filing stamped with the seal of the family court. "This is a petition for divorce," I said. "I had Jim Caldwell draw it up this afternoon. It is already filed. It is not from me. It is on behalf of Lucas. You see, when a spouse attempts to murder the father of her husband to secure an inheritance, it is considered irreconcilable differences. And since Lucas is going to be incapacitated by the legal system for quite some time, I am acting as his proxy to ensure his assets. What little is left of them are protected from you." Monica stared at the paper, her mouth opening and closing. "And this," I said, holding up the final document. "This is a civil order for the immediate seizure of personal assets to repay the debt on the fraudulent mortgage. It lists everything, Monica. Your car, that Mercedes you love so much, your jewelry, the designer bags you bought with my retirement money. It is all being seized. Tonight. Right now, there is a tow truck backing into your driveway." Her face went slack. The rage evaporated, replaced by a hollow, dawning horror. The money, the things, the status. That was all she cared about. The prison sentence hadn't broken her, but the loss of her Mercedes did. "You can't do that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That is mine." "It was never yours," I corrected her. "It was mine. It was bought with the sweat off my back and the steel I laid. You were just borrowing it, and the lease is up." Bob nodded to his officers. "Get her out of here. Read her rights in the car. And bag that vial of insulin for the lab. I want a full toxicology report on the soup, too." They began to drag her toward the door. She started to cry, then a loud wailing sound that grated on my nerves. It wasn't the cry of someone who was sorry. It was the cry of a child who had been told playtime was over. As they pushed her through the doorframe, she turned her head back to me one last time. "Lucas won't forgive you," she screamed, desperation clawing at her throat. "He loves me. He will hate you for this. He will never speak to you again." I looked at her and I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a vast, empty silence where my love for them used to be. "He doesn't have a choice," I said. "He is next." The door slammed shut, cutting off her screams. The silence rushed back into the kitchen, ringing in my ears. I stood there for a moment looking at the empty room. The table was a mess. The floor was dirty. My house, my sanctuary, had been turned into a crime scene. But as I looked at the knife sticking out of the table, I didn't feel violated. I felt clean. I had lanced the boil. The infection was gone. Now I just had to deal with the scar. Bob walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. He looked at the knife, then at me. "You okay, Harrison?" he asked. That was close." I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of rain and old wood. "I am fine, Bob. I am better than fine. I am awake." Bob nodded. "We have a car waiting to take you to the station for a statement, but we can wait a minute if you need to sit down." I shook my head. I buttoned my flannel shirt covering the wire that had recorded everything. I picked up my keys from the counter. I looked at the clock. It was 9:30. "I don't need to sit down," I said. "And I can't go to the station yet. I have one more stop to make." Bob looked confused. "Where are you going?" I walked to the wall and pulled the plug on the TV, silencing the static. I turned to my old friend. "I am going to the hospital," I said. "My son is waiting for his paper. He is waiting for his wife to come back with the keys to the kingdom. I think I should be the one to deliver the news." Bob hesitated. "Harrison Lucas he is an accomplice, but he is still your son. Are you sure you want to do this tonight? Let us pick him up. You don't have to see him." I looked at the photo of Patrice on the mantel. I thought about the $30,000 my father had given to a stranger. I thought about the honor of a handshake. And then I thought about Lucas watching his wife swing a baseball bat at his own leg. "He isn't my son," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "He is a failed investment, and I am going to close the account." I walked out of the kitchen past the police tape that was already being strung up across my front door. The rain had stopped, leaving the world slick and black. I got into my truck. I didn't look back at the house. I drove toward the city, toward the hospital, toward the final confrontation. The envelope with the eviction notice was sitting on the passenger seat beside me. It was the only inheritance Lucas was going to get, and I was going to make sure he received it by hand. The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights and silence. Chief Miller drove his unmarked car while Jim Caldwell sat in the passenger seat, reviewing the legal files one last time under the glow of the dashboard lights. I sat in the back, staring out at the city I had helped build. I felt a strange sense of detachment. The man who had wept over his wife's photo earlier that evening was gone. The man sitting in the back seat was simply an observer traveling to the site of a structural failure to sign off on the condemnation order. We parked in the emergency bay, the police lights flashing silently against the brick walls. We took the elevator up to the 4th floor. The hospital was quiet now, the chaotic energy of the day replaced by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the squeak of nurses' shoes. I led the way. I didn't need a cane. I didn't need support. I walked with the steady, measured pace of a man who knows exactly where he is going. When we reached room 402, I could hear the television playing softly inside. I paused for a moment, my hand hovering over the push plate. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sterile air. This was it. The final demolition. I pushed the door open, pushed the swing. Lucas was awake. He was propped up against a mountain of pillows, his eyes fixed on the door, a smile already forming on his lips. He looked expecting. He looked triumphant. In his mind, Monica was walking through that door with a signed power of attorney and a check that would solve all his problems. He was probably already spending the money in his head, buying his way out of debt, buying his way back into the high life. "Dad," he said, his voice bright and eager. "Finally. Where is Monica? Did she get the—" His voice trailed off. The smile died on his lips, withering like a leaf in a fire. He saw me standing there, stone-faced. Then he saw Jim Caldwell, the family lawyer he had avoided for years. And then looming behind us both, he saw Chief Miller in his uniform, his hand resting casually near his holster. The air in the room changed instantly. The smell of anticipation was replaced by the sour scent of fear. Lucas looked between us, his eyes darting frantically. He tried to sit up straighter, but the cast on his leg anchored him to the bed. "What is going on?" he asked, his voice pitching up. "Where is my wife? Dad, did you give her the papers? Is everything okay?" I didn't answer him. I didn't even look him in the eye. I walked past the foot of the bed to the wall-mounted television. It was playing a late-night talk show, canned laughter filling the tense silence. I picked up the remote control from the bedside table. I pressed the channel button, flipping through the stations until I found the local news. I turned the volume up. Breaking news tonight, out of the quiet suburb of Oak Park, the anchorwoman announced, her face grave. Police have arrested a local woman in connection with a plot to murder her father-in-law. The screen cut to live footage from a helicopter circling above my house. The police lights were blinding, washing out the colors of the lawn. Then the camera cut to a ground-level shot. It showed the front door of my home. 2 officers were lighting a woman out in handcuffs. She was fighting them, screaming, her hair wild, her expensive coat falling off her shoulders. It was Monica. Lucas stared at the screen. His mouth fell open. His skin turned the color of old ash. He watched as his wife was shoved into the back of a squad car, the door slamming shut on her screams. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read in bold red letters: "Attempted poisoning. Insurance fraud scheme exposed." I turned off the TV. The silence that rushed back into the room was absolute. Lucas looked at me. His eyes were wide, glassy circles of terror. He started to shake. It wasn't a subtle tremble. It was a violent shuddering that rattled the bed frame. And then a dark stain began to spread across the light blue hospital sheet covering his groin. It grew rapidly, accompanied by the sharp ammonia smell of urine. He had lost control. The arrogant broker, the gambler, the man who thought he could outsmart his father, had wet himself like a toddler. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling so hard the words barely formed. "Dad, please." It wasn't me. I stood at the foot of the bed watching him. I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just a cold observation of facts. She forced me. Lucas stammered, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot running from his nose. "You know how she is. She is crazy. She made me do it. She said she would leave me. She said she would take everything. I didn't want to hurt you, I swear. I was bewitched, Dad. I am your son, I am your boy." He reached out a hand toward me, his fingers grasping at the air. "Please, Dad, tell them. Tell them I am a victim too. Look at my leg. She broke my leg. She is a monster. I am innocent." I looked at his outstretched hand. I looked at the cast that went from his toes to his hip. I remembered the video. I remembered him sitting on the sofa drinking whiskey to dull the pain, nodding his head. I remembered him propping his leg up on the table, offering it as a sacrifice to his own greed. I stepped closer to the bed. I leaned in until my face was inches from his. I could smell the fear on him. I could smell the urine. "You are not a victim, Lucas," I said, my voice low and hard as granite. "I saw the video. I saw you sit there. I saw you nod. I saw you choose." Lucas flinched as if I had hit him. He pulled his hand back, curling it against his chest. "You broke your own leg," I continued, pointing at the plaster cast. "You let her shatter your bones because you were too lazy to work and too cowardly to face your debts. You thought my life was worth less than a gambling slip. You thought you could harvest me like a crop." "Dad, please," he sobbed, choking on his own breath. "I am sorry. I will pay it back. I will fix it. Just don't let them take me." I straightened up. I looked at Jim Caldwell. Jim reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single white envelope. It was the eviction notice. It was the civil suit for the stolen mortgage. He placed it on the tray table over Lucas's lap, right next to the untouched water pitcher. "That leg is going to hurt for a long time," I said to Lucas. "The doctors say it was a bad break, a complex fracture. It will ache when it rains. It will stiffen up in the cold." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Good. I want you to feel it. Every time that leg throbs, every time you limp, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you did this to yourself. You bought that pain. It is the only thing you own now." Lucas stared at the envelope, then up at me, his eyes pleading, begging for a lifeline, for a father's forgiveness. "Dad," he whispered, "I am your son." I looked him up and down. I looked at the man who had stolen my house. I looked at the man who had waited for me to die. "I don't have a son," I said. The words hung in the air, final and absolute. I used to have a son, but he died a long time ago. What I have now is a bad debt, a liability, and tonight I am writing it off. I turned my back on him. I heard him gasp a sound of pure devastation. "Dad, wait!" he screamed. "You can't leave me here. I have nothing. They are going to put me in jail." "Dad." I walked toward the door. Jim and Chief Miller followed me. We stepped out into the hallway. Behind us, Lucas was screaming a raw animal sound of despair. "Dad, come back, please." I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked down the corridor, the screams fading with every step. I felt lighter. The weight that had been pressing down on me for months, the weight of guilt, of obligation, of love for people who didn't deserve it, was gone. I had cut the anchor. I was drifting free. We reached the elevator. Chief Miller pressed the button. He looked at me, his expression somber. "You okay, Harrison?" he asked quietly. I listened to the silence of the hospital. The screaming had stopped, or maybe I just couldn't hear it anymore. "I am fine, Bob," I said. "I am just fine." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, leaving the 4th floor behind. I was leaving the sickness behind. I was going down to the ground floor, and then I was walking out the front door. I had a new life waiting for me. A life paid for by a debt from 60 years ago. A life I was finally free to live. 3 months had passed since the night the police took Monica away in handcuffs. The seasons had changed outside, turning from the wet gray of spring to the humid heat of a Chicago summer. But inside the county courthouse, the air remained cold and stagnant. I sat in the witness box, my hands resting on the polished wood railing. I was wearing a new suit, charcoal gray, tailored to fit the man I had become, not the shadow I used to be. I looked out at the defense table. Monica sat on the left, her hair dyed back to its natural brown, wearing a modest beige cardigan that was clearly chosen by her public defender to make her look like a librarian instead of a killer. She stared straight ahead, refusing to look at me. Lucas sat on the right. His cast was gone, replaced by a walking boot. He looked thinner, paler. He was playing the part of the broken victim perfectly. He kept his head down, dabbing at his eyes with a tissue every time the jury looked his way. His lawyer, a man named Sterling, who charged by the minute, was in the middle of his closing argument. He was pacing in front of the jury box, gesturing theatrically toward Lucas. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy, "we are not denying that crimes were committed. We are not denying the fraud. But we must look at the power dynamics here. Look at my client. He is a man who was terrified. He was living in a home controlled by a woman who wielded a baseball bat as a weapon of compliance. He was physically assaulted by her. He was psychologically broken. He didn't conspire to kill his father. He was a hostage in his own marriage, too afraid to speak up, too afraid to save himself." I watched the jury. I saw a few heads nodding. I saw sympathy in the eyes of an older woman in the second row. Sterling was good. He was painting a picture of my son as a pathetic, helpless leaf blown about by the hurricane that was Monica. If they bought it, Lucas might walk away with probation. He might be free in a year to find another Mark, another father to bleed dry. The prosecutor stood up. He looked at me. "Mr. Bennett, do you have any response to the defense's characterization of your son as a passive victim?" I leaned forward toward the microphone. The courtroom went silent. I looked directly at Lucas. He finally lifted his head, his eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker of hope there. He thought I might soften. He thought that in the end, a father would always cover for his son. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a single sheet of paper folded in thirds. It wasn't part of the original discovery file. It was something my forensic accountant had found just 2 days ago, buried deep in the encrypted chat logs of the server I had seized from their basement. I said, my voice steady and clear. "The defense claims my son was afraid. They claim he was forced. But fear doesn't write emails like this." I handed the paper to the bailiff, who walked it over to the judge. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, took the paper. She read it. Her eyebrows shot up. She looked at Lucas with a gaze that could have frozen water. "Please read it for the record, Mr. Bennett," she said. I cleared my throat. "This is an email sent from Lucas Bennett's private encrypted account to an address associated with the loan shark known as Sal. It is dated 3 days before he broke his leg." I began to read. The words tasted like bile, but I forced them out. "Sal, I know I am late, but I have a solution. Stop threatening the house. The old man is 73. He has a heart condition. He is weak. I am going to make sure he checks out early. We will have the insurance money and the estate within the month. Just give me a few weeks to set the stage. He trusts me. He is stupid. He won't see it coming." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum where all the air has been sucked out. The sympathy in the jury box vanished instantly, replaced by a collective look of revulsion. I looked at Lucas. The hope in his eyes had died. His face was the color of old ash. He slumped in his chair, shrinking into himself as if trying to disappear into the floor. He wasn't a victim. He wasn't a hostage. He was the architect. He had sold his father's life to save his own skin. "That email," I said, looking at the jury, "proves that my son wasn't afraid of his wife. He was afraid of the consequences of his own greed. He wasn't forced to kill me. He volunteered." Sterling sat down heavily. He didn't even try to object. He knew it was over. The narrative of the helpless husband had just been shattered by the undeniable reality of a son willing to trade his father's heartbeat for a clear ledger. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, they didn't look at the defendants. The foreman stood up and read the verdicts. We, the jury, find the defendant, Monica Bennett, guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, grand larceny. We, the jury, find the defendant, Lucas Bennett, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't waste time with the pre-sentencing hearing. She had heard enough. She looked at Monica. "You are a predator," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "You manipulated the system and the people who loved you. I sentence you to 20 years in a state penitentiary without the possibility of parole for 15. Monica put her head on the table and began to sob, but no one was listening. The judge turned to Lucas. "And you, Mr. Bennett, you are perhaps even worse. You betrayed the most fundamental bond of human nature, the bond between a child and a parent. You sold your father for a gambling debt. I sentence you to 15 years. The gavel banged down. It was a sharp final sound, like a door slamming shut on a lifetime of mistakes. The bailiffs moved in. They pulled Monica up first. She was limp, wailing, her legs dragging as they hauled her toward the side door. Then they went for Lucas. He struggled. He tried to stand, but his bad leg buckled. They grabbed him by the arms. As they dragged him past the witness stand, he locked eyes with me. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask of the loving son had finally fallen away completely, revealing the rot underneath. "You will die alone," he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "You hear me, old man? You will rot in that big house and no one will find you for weeks. You will have no one to bury you. You are nothing without me. Nothing." His voice echoed off the high ceilings, bouncing around the wood and marble. People in the gallery gasped. The judge shouted for order. I stood there and watched him. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt a strange, calm lightness. I reached up and adjusted my tie, centering the knot. I smoothed the lapels of my charcoal suit. I looked at the man who used to be my son, the man who had promised to expedite my death, and I realized he was wrong. I wasn't alone. I had the memory of Patrice. I had the legacy of my father, Hector. I had the gratitude of Alfred. And I had the respect of the man in the mirror. I didn't say a word. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a response. I simply turned my back on him. I picked up my hat from the railing. I walked down the center aisle, my shoes clicking rhythmically on the floor. Behind me, Lucas was still screaming, his voice growing fainter as the heavy oak doors swallowed him up. "You need me. You will see. You need me." I pushed open the double doors at the back of the courtroom. The noise of the hallway, the mundane chatter of lawyers and clerks washed over me. I walked through the metal detectors and out into the bright, blinding sunshine of the afternoon. I took a deep breath of the city air. It smelled of exhaust and hot pavement, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I walked to the curb and hailed a cab. I didn't need to drive for Uber anymore. I didn't need to count pennies for a bus. I had $32 million in the bank, and for the first time in 6 months, I had my life back. I wasn't going to die alone. I was going to live, and I was going to start right now. The sun down here in the Florida Keys hits differently than it does in Chicago. It does not just light things up. It warms them all the way through to the bone. I am sitting on the wrap around porch of a small yellow bungalow that sits on stilts above the white sand. The ocean stretches out in front of me, a band of turquoise and sapphire that looks endless. I have a canvas in front of me and a palette of oil paints in my hand. I am not building skyscrapers anymore. I am not calculating load-bearing ratios or wind shear. I am trying to capture the exact shade of blue where the water meets the sky. I am not very good at it yet. My lines are too straight. My perspective is too rigid. But for the first time in my life, I am allowed to make mistakes. I can paint over them. There are no consequences. No one gets hurt if my horizon line is crooked. It has been a year since the trial, A year since I walked out of that courtroom and left my old life behind. It took 6 months to settle the affairs in Chicago. Selling the house was harder than I expected, not because of the market, but because of the memories. I walked through the empty rooms one last time before handing over the keys. I touched the wall where we marked the boys' heights. I stood in the kitchen where Monica tried to kill me. But when I closed the front door, I didn't look back. It was just wood and brick. The home had left a long time ago. The financial side of things resolved itself in a way that would have made my father smile. Jim Caldwell, bless his stubborn heart, didn't just defend me. He went on the offensive. He filed a countersuit against the insurance company that held the policy on my house. He argued that their adjuster had been negligent, that they had failed to investigate Lucas's initial claim properly, which emboldened him to commit further fraud. They fought it at first, but when the publicity of the criminal trial started to heat up, they folded. They wrote a check for a significant sum just to keep their name out of the papers. It was enough to pay off the fraudulent mortgage Lucas had taken out, with plenty left over. It felt like the final brick falling into place. The house paid for its own freedom. I didn't keep all the money. $32 million is too much for one old man who likes simple food and quiet mornings. I kept enough to buy this bungalow and secure my comfort, but the rest needed to go somewhere it would do good. I thought about my father giving his savings to a stranger. I thought about the ripple effect of that one act. So I started my own ripple. I established the Sarah Jenkins Nursing Scholarship. It is a full-ride endowment for students from working-class families who want to go into nursing but can't afford the tuition. I put Sarah in charge of the selection committee. I remember the day I told her. We were sitting in a coffee shop, the snow falling outside. I slid the trust documents across the table. She read them, and she started to cry, right there in the middle of the morning rush. She came around the table and hugged me, burying her face in my shoulder. She told me I didn't have to do it. I told her that she was the one who pulled me out of the fire. She gave me the note. She gave me the recording. She saved my life. This was the least I could do. We talk every Sunday now. She tells me about the students they are helping. She tells me about her kids. Last week, she ended the call by saying, "I love you, Dad." It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a choice. She chose me as family, just as I chose her. And that word coming from her healed a part of my heart I thought was dead forever. I dip my brush into the cerulean blue. I mix it with a little titanium white. I apply it to the canvas, watching the colors blend. It is peaceful here. The neighbors are fishermen and retirees. They don't know I am a millionaire. They just know me as Harrison, the guy who is terrible at painting seagulls but makes a mean pot of coffee. I like it that way. My phone sits on the small wooden table next to my easel. It starts to vibrate, buzzing against the wood like an angry hornet. I wipe my hands on a rag and pick it up. The screen is bright in the shade of the porch. The caller ID displays a number I have memorized, not because I call it, but because I ignore it. It is the generic number for the Illinois State Penitentiary System. It is Lucas. Or maybe it is Monica trying to call collect from the women's facility. It doesn't matter which one it is. It is Tuesday. Tuesday is the day Lucas usually calls. He has been in for a year. He has 14 more to go. I can imagine what he wants. He wants money for the commissary. He wants a better lawyer for an appeal. Or maybe he just wants to scream at me again. Maybe he wants to blame me for the fact that he is living in a cage while I am living in paradise. He wants to tell me that it is my fault he is there, that I should have protected him from his own greed. I look at the phone. I look at the name of the prison scrolling across the screen. I feel a phantom ache in my chest, a ghost of the love I used to have for the little boy with the scraped knees. But then I remember the sound of the bone snapping. I remember the silence when his wife talked about insulin. I remember the hatred in his eyes in the courtroom. I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel removed. It is like looking at a storm on the radar that is moving away from you. You know it is dangerous. You know it is destroying things somewhere else, but here the sun is shining. I don't answer. I don't let it ring out. I press the side button to silence the call. Then I open the settings menu. I find the number in the recent calls list. I select block caller. A small dialog box pops up asking me to confirm. I press yes. It is a small digital action, a tap of a finger, but it feels like cutting the last thread of a heavy anchor. I put the phone back on the table face down. The buzzing stops. The only sound is the waves lapping against the pilings and the cry of a pelican diving for fish. I pick up my brush again. The paint is still wet. I look at the horizon I am trying to paint. It is vast and open and full of possibility. I am 71 years old. I have a bad back and a heart that skips a beat sometimes, but I have never felt more alive. I have a legacy that is clean. I have a daughter who loves me for who I am, not what I have. And I have this view. People always say that blood is thicker than water. They use it as a weapon. They use it to bind you to people who hurt you, people who drain you, people who would break your legs to get a payout. They tell you that family is everything, that you have to forgive, that you have to endure. But looking out at this endless blue ocean, I know the truth. Sometimes clean water is better than toxic blood. I lived in a poisoned house for a long time. I let the rot spread because I was afraid to tear down the walls. But I learned that you cannot fix a foundation that is built on lies. You have to demolish it. You have to clear the rubble. And only then can you build something new. I have cut out the necrotic part of my life. The surgery was painful. The recovery was long. But the infection is gone. I am healing. I dip the brush into the white paint and add a single bright highlight to the crest of a wave on my canvas. It isn't perfect, but it is mine. And for the first time in a long time, I am looking forward to seeing how the picture turns out. I thought I had reinforced the walls of my new life sufficiently. I thought the miles between the Florida Keys and the Illinois State Penitentiary were a wide enough moat to keep the monsters at bay. But as any engineer knows, you can account for wind shear and load-bearing weight, but you can never fully predict the chaotic variable of human desperation. 6 months after I blocked Lucas's number, a letter arrived. It wasn't in a standard envelope. It was thick, heavy, and bore the official stamp of the Illinois Department of Corrections, but it was marked Chaplaincy Services. I sat on my porch, the ocean breeze ruffling the edges of the paper, and stared at it. My hands didn't shake this time. They were steady, calloused from holding a paintbrush instead of a wrench. I sliced it open. It wasn't a letter from Lucas. It was from a prison chaplain named Father Thomas. "Dear Mr. Bennett," it read, "I am writing to you concerning your son, inmate 89402. Lucas has been moved to the infirmary. He has been diagnosed with a degenerative kidney condition. The doctors are managing it, but his spirit is broken. He has asked for you. He claims he has a confession to make regarding your late wife, Patrice. He says he cannot die with this secret on his soul. He is not asking for money. He is asking for absolution. A confession about Patrice." That name was the one structural weakness I had left. They knew it. If Lucas had asked for money, I would have burned the letter. If he had asked for forgiveness for himself, I would have ignored it. But to dangle my wife's memory, that was a calculated strike at the foundation. I called Sarah immediately. "It's a trap, Harrison," she said, her voice sharp through the phone speaker. "You know it is. He's been in there for 18 months. He's had time to think of a new angle." "I know," I replied, watching a heron land on the railing. "But he mentioned Patrice. If there is something, if there is even a 1% chance he knows something I don't, I have to know. An engineer doesn't leave a variable unchecked, Sarah. We investigate until we find the failure point." "I'm going with you," she said. No hesitation, no questions. I'm not letting you walk back into that toxicity alone. 2 days later, we were in the visitor's room of the prison infirmary. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and misery. Sarah sat beside me holding my hand. Her grip was firm, grounding me. When they wheeled Lucas in, I barely recognized him. The arrogant, well-groomed real estate broker was gone. In his place was a gaunt, sallow man with thinning hair and eyes that darted around the room like a trapped rat. He looked 20 years older. He saw me, and a flicker of something passed over his face. It wasn't relief. It looked like calculation. "Dad," he croaked. "You came." "I'm here to listen, Lucas," I said, my voice flat. "The chaplain said you had something to say about your mother." Lucas coughed, a wet, rattling sound. He leaned forward, the handcuffs clinking against the metal table. "I do. But first, look at me, Dad. I'm dying in here. The food, the cold, it's killing me." "The doctors say your condition is manageable," Sarah interjected, her voice icy. "We checked your medical file on the way in." Lucas shot her a look of pure venom, the mask slipping for a millisecond, before he returned his gaze to me. "She doesn't understand family, Dad. She's just a nurse. She's paid to care. I'm your blood." "Stop," I said. "Get to the point. What about Patrice?" Lucas licked his lips. "Mom, before she died, she wrote a second will. A real one. She didn't trust you, Dad. She thought you were getting senile even back then. She left everything to me, hidden in the lining of her jewelry box. The blue velvet one." I stared at him. The blue velvet jewelry box. I knew exactly where it was. It was in my safe in Florida. I had gone through it 1,000 times. There was nothing in the lining. "And?" I asked. "What do you want, Lucas?" "I want you to get me a better lawyer," he whispered, his eyes wide and desperate. "Get me out on compassionate release. If you do that, I'll tell you where the rest of her hidden diaries are. She wrote about how unhappy she was, how you stifled her, how she wanted me to have the money so I could be free." I sat there looking at the creature that shared my DNA. I analyzed his structure. I looked for the truth, and I found only rot. He was lying. Not just about the will that was a clumsy fabrication, but about Patrice's happiness. He was trying to rewrite history, to retroactively poison the 45 years of love I had shared with his mother, just to squeeze a few dollars out of me for a lawyer. It was the final stress test, and he had failed. I stood up slowly. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a profound, hollow pity. "You know, Lucas," I said softly, "I remember that jewelry box. I opened it on our anniversary 3 years ago. Patrice and I laughed because the lining was coming loose, and we glued it back together. Together. There was no will. There were no secret diaries." Lucas's face fell. The sickly act vanished, replaced by the snarling face I had seen in the courtroom. "You old fool," he hissed. "You're going to let your son rot in here for what? For pride? I deserve that money. It was Mom's money." "It wasn't Mom's money," I corrected him. "And it wasn't my money. It was our life, a life you never understood because you only see value in things you can sell." I turned to Sarah. "We're done here." "Dad, wait!" Lucas screamed, straining against his restraints. "You can't leave me. I'm sick. I'm your son." I stopped at the heavy steel door. I looked back at him one last time. "No," I said. "You're not my son. You're a structural failure. And I'm finally condemning the building." We walked out into the gray Illinois afternoon. The sky was overcast, but the air felt clean. Sarah didn't say a word until we reached the rental car. Then she pulled a folder out of her bag. "I wasn't going to show you this today," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't want to upset you before you saw him. But I think you need to see it now." I took the folder. Inside were adoption papers. Adult adoption papers. I talked to a lawyer, Sarah said, looking down at her hands. My dad, he was a good man, but he's been gone a long time. And you, Harrison, you've been more of a father to me in 1 year than anyone has been in my entire life. I don't want your money. I signed a waiver right there in the packet. I want it to be real. I want to be a Bennett. I want my kids to have a grandfather who is a hero. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at Sarah. I thought about the blood is thicker than water lie. I thought about the poison I had just left in that prison cell. And then I looked at the woman who had saved my life in a hospital corridor, who had risked her job for a stranger, who had driven me here to face my demons. You didn't have to sign a waiver, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I pulled a pen from my pocket, the same expensive pen I used to sign my paintings. I signed the line at the bottom of the page, Harrison Bennett, father. Blood makes you relatives, I said, hugging her as the tears finally came washing away the last of the grime from the prison. Loyalty makes you family. Let's go home, daughter. The integration of Sarah and her children into my quiet life wasn't just a renovation, it was a complete repurposing of the structure. I had spent so many years reinforcing my walls to keep people out that I had forgotten what it felt like to open the windows. Sarah's children, Leo and Maya, didn't care about my bank account or my past career. To them, I wasn't a wealthy retired engineer. I was just Pop Amoshu, the guy who knew how to fix broken toys and mix the perfect shade of turquoise paint. One afternoon, I found 10-year-old Leo staring at one of my old blueprints framed in the hallway, the schematics for the Millennium Spire. I braced myself for the usual questions Lucas used to ask. How much did you get paid for this, or is it famous instead? Leo pointed to the truss system on the drawing. Pop, he asked, his brow furrowed in genuine curiosity. How does the wind go through it without pushing it over? I felt a lump in my throat that had nothing to do with age. It's called aerodynamics, son, I said, kneeling beside him. You don't fight the wind. You let it pass through. You build space for it. That was the moment I realized the true nature of my legacy. It wasn't the millions in the bank or the buildings in Chicago. It was this. It was teaching a boy how to stand strong against the wind. It was watching Maya run through the surf with the dog safe and unburdened by the greed that had poisoned my own son. The silence of my bungalow was replaced by the chaotic, beautiful noise of living. Sticky fingerprints on the glass doors, sand on the floorboards, and laughter, so much laughter. It turned out that a house doesn't need to be a fortress. It just needs good people to hold the roof up. The months leading up to the gallery show were a different kind of construction work. I didn't just paint. I engineered the emotions onto the canvas. I approached each piece the same way I used to approach a site survey. I used a palette knife like a trowel, layering the oils thick to build texture, creating structures that could withstand the weight of the past. Sarah would often sit on the porch railing while I worked, watching silently as I sketched the chaotic lines of the Demolition series, dark, violent strokes representing the night the police took Monica away. But she also saw the shift as I moved to the reconstruction phase. You paint like you're fixing something, she remarked one evening, watching me meticulously blend the golden hues for Patrice's portrait. I am, I replied, wiping a smudge of ochre from my thumb. I'm fixing the memory. Lucas tried to taint it, to twist it into something ugly, to serve his greed. But this, I gestured to the glowing canvas, this is the restoration. I'm stripping away the rot so we can see the original wood again. It was slow work. Healing, I discovered, is a lot like curing high-grade concrete. You can't rush the chemical reaction. You have to keep it protected and let time do the heavy lifting. But when it finally sets, it's harder than stone. Epilogue. 6 months later, the gallery in Key West is crowded tonight. The air smells of salt water and expensive wine. People are moving from canvas to canvas, murmuring in appreciation. They are looking at a series of paintings titled Structural Integrity. The paintings aren't of skyscrapers or bridges. They are portraits. One is of a woman with kind eyes in a nurse's uniform, holding a finger to her lips. One is of a young boy helping an old man up from a fall. And the centerpiece, the largest canvas, is a portrait of Patrice. She is sitting on the porch of this very bungalow, looking out at the ocean bathed in golden light. But if you look closely, you can see that the porch is supported not by wood, but by hands, my hands. Sarah's hands holding her up. "It's a masterpiece, Dad," Sarah says, appearing beside me. She is holding a glass of sparkling cider. She looks radiant. "It's just paint and canvas," I say, but I'm smiling. "No," she says, leaning her head on my shoulder. "It's the truth. You finally fixed the foundation." My phone buzzes in my pocket. I ignore it. I know who it isn't. It isn't the prison. It isn't the lawyers. It isn't the past. It's probably the pizza place confirming the order for my grandkids who are currently running amok on the beach below the deck. I look at the horizon. The line where the blue meets the blue is straight and true. The storm has passed. The structure is sound. I am Harrison Bennett. I am 72 years old, and for the first time in my life, I am exactly where I am supposed to be.